Hi, I'm Paul Kyogan from GK Tuition, and in this video I want to talk to you about algebra. Now the question I've chosen to go through here is 2019 Paper 1 Question 1 Part A. In this question we're given two brackets, the first one 2x plus 1, the second one x squared plus px plus 4. And we're told that the coefficient in the expansion of these brackets, the coefficient of x is twice as big as the coefficient of x squared. And with that in mind, we're asked to find the value of p. So obviously the first thing we need to do is figure out what are the coefficients of x and what are the coefficients of x squared. So the first thing we do here is we just multiply it out. If you're multiplying out double brackets, it's the first thing in the first bracket by the second bracket, the second thing in the first bracket by the second bracket. And if I multiply it out fully, this is the line that I get. At this stage now, you should isolate your x squareds and then isolate your x's. Once we've multiplied it out fully, our x squareds are 2px squared plus x squared. And our x's are 8x plus px. Let's just take the x squared for the moment. In order to figure out what the coefficient is, we need to factorize out our x squared. So if I factorize out x squared, all I'm left with then is 2p plus 1. And for our x's, in order to get the coefficient, I just factorize out x and I'm left with 8 plus p. So the coefficient of x is this bracket, the coefficient of x squared is this bracket. And the question tells us that the coefficient of x is twice as big as this. So in other words, just in your head think, alright, if that's a 10 then this is a 5. If that's a 20 then this is a 10. Basically this is twice as big as that. So now we need to come up with an equation to find the value of p. So the easiest way to do that, clearly if this number is twice as big as that and I want to get them equal to each other, I just need to multiply this one by 2. If I take the coefficient of x squared and I multiply it by 2, I could just write that as 2 times 2p plus 1. And that will be equal to 8 plus p. So now I know that these are equal to each other. All of a sudden now I've got one equation, I've got one unknown, which means I can find the value of p. So if we just multiply this out, we get 4p plus 2 is equal to 8 plus p. If I bring the p on the right hand side over to the left, it becomes 4p minus p. And if I bring the 2 over to the right, it becomes 8 minus 2. 4p minus p is 3p, 8 minus 2 is 6. And I divide both sides by 3 in order to get my final answer. Clearly here, if I know that 3p is equal to 6, I divide both sides by 3 and I get p is equal to 2. So your final answer for that part of the question is just p equals 2. Okay, in the second part of this question, we're given two fractions on the left equal to a fraction on the right. And we're asked to solve the equation. Or in other words, we're asked to find x. Now the easiest way to find x in this case is to get a common denominator for all three fractions. So what I did here was, the easiest way to get a common denominator is you just multiply the three denominators by each other. So the common denominator is just 2x plus 1 times 5 times 3x minus 1. And we don't need to multiply that out. Now, to figure out what goes on top, a lot of students struggle. So the first thing I would do is I realize there's a 3 on the numerator of the first fraction is 3, so I take that down. And then you ask yourself, how many times does 2x plus 1 divide into the bottom of this fraction? So if I divided 2x plus 1 into this denominator, what would I get? Well, if you divided 2x plus 1 into this, the 2x plus 1 would cancel with itself. The 2x plus 1 would cancel with itself, and I would just be left with 5 times 3x minus 1. So hence on the top here, I've multiplied what I put down originally by 5 by 3x minus 1. That's the first term we have on the top. Now I need to figure out what goes next. So next you'll notice that we've got a plus 2 on the top of the next fraction, so I take down a plus 2. I follow the same logic and I ask myself, how many times does 5 divide into my denominator? Well, 5 will cancel with itself and I'd be left with 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 1. So you end up with 2 times those two. 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 1. Then there's an equals, so you stick in your equals, then there's a 2, so it becomes equals 2. And now you have to ask yourself, how many times does 3x minus 1 divide into this denominator? 3x minus 1 would cancel with itself and I'd be left with 5 times 2x plus 1. So it ends up with, I already had an equals 2 and I keep on the 5 times 2x plus 1. Now the whole point of getting the common denominator here is if you have an equals on the top of a fraction, you can just cancel out the bottom. So because there's an equals here, I can just ignore the bottom of the fraction. And happy days, now I just have a linear equation, I can just multiply this out. So what I did on the next line was 3 by 5 gave me 15, 2 by 2x plus 1 gave me 4x plus 2, and 2 by 5 gave me 10. And now I just need to continue on and multiply it out. You'll notice I've multiplied it all out, and at this line I had an x squared, I had an x, and I had a number. So I identified that it's a quadratic, and when you simplify it, you get 12x squared plus 27x minus 27 equals 0. The numbers are a bit big there, so we divide both sides by 3. When you divide both sides by 3, your quadratic is 4x squared plus 9x minus 9 equals 0. And now I'm just going to continue this on. I just need to factorize this and find my two values for x. Okay, so here we've got a relatively straightforward quadratic equation. The factors of this quadratic are 4x minus 3 times x plus 3. I just let each one equal to 0 and then I solve my questions. I solve it and my two answers here are x equals minus 3 and x equals 3/4.